Welcome students to the Polity Revision lecture. As per my information, we have done almost all the syllabus of polity that we have except one chapter, correct? We have also finished the chapter what is democracy, why democracy. The chapter number is second, actually it is misprinted here. It is given as the chapter number 6, but it is the chapter number 2, what is democracy, why democracy. As I have talked about the democracy to you many times, and I explained the need of democracy in the world, and also democracy is the world's most, is as per my opinion, most important form of the government that we should have to deal. We'll go first to see the definition of democracy. Democracy is a form of government in which the rulers are elected by the people. One chief factor common to all democracies is that government is chosen by the people. It also helps students to democrate between democratic and non-democratic governments. From the non-democratic government, take the example of Myanmar, where rulers were not elected by the people. Those who were in charge of the army of the country took over as ruler, and people had no say in this decision. Dictators like Pinochet, Chile, what we have seen in the first chapter, are not elected by the people. This also applies to monarchies. So democracy's opposite form, there are many, like they uh, all the other from, like the kingship or the monarchy or the autocracy, or the bureaucracy. Okay, so these all are different cases than democracy. While looking for that, we have seen the example of Myanmar. Now the features of democracy. Simple definition of the democracy is given, gives rise to various questions which are below. Who are the rulers in in this definition? So the definition that we have seen, okay, inside it many questions can come in our mind, but before that I'll tell you the definition, that by the people, for the people, through, by the people, for the people, and uh, for the welfarement of the people. It's the simple definition that Abraham Lincoln given to us. It is the democracy. uh, what kind of election constitutes a democratic election? Who are the people who can elect the rulers to get elected as rulers? Finally, what form of government is a democracy? Major decisions by elected leaders. So these are the questions that always came in our mind while looking for the definition of democracy. Some countries like Pakistan do not follow this rule. In Pakistan, General Pervez Musharraf led a military coup in October 1999. He overthrew the democratically elected government and went to become the president of country. Example of Pervez Musharraf, the head of the military in the Pakistan, overthrown the power to become prime minister, president of the country. In 2002, he also held a referendum in the country that granted him a 5-year extension. So referendum, another kind of plebiscite he did in the Pakistan, which resulted that another 5 year in the service granted by the people. Meanwhile, after passing of this legal framework order, elections were held to the national and provisional assemblies, and the elected representatives were granted some powers. But the rest, or I mean all the powers, are uh, concentrated in the hands of Musharraf. Whatever he thinks, he do for that. But the final power rested with military officers and General Musharraf himself. Hence, we can conclude it was not democratic country, not a democratic country. The same thing happens in many dictatorships and monarchies. Thus, we can conclude that in a democracy, the final decision-making power must rest with those elected by the people. Means The decision making power in India is in the hands of Prime Minister of India. If he do something wrong, people will overthrow him from power. And also there is constitutional framework, and everything is under the light of the constitution. That's why we can't say that India cannot be a good democracy in the world. Yes, of course, we are very proud in case of our India, and India is a great democracy in the world. Free and fair election competitions. In China, elections are held after every 5 years for electing the country's parliament, called Kongyo Remnim Daibyo Duhai, means National People's Congress. It's the China's National People's Congress name. Before contesting election, a candidate needs the approval of the Chinese Communist Party. Yes, of course, the only party that is in rule is the Communist Party, and without prior permission of the Communist Party, one cannot fight the election. The government is always formed by Communist Party. Alternatively, since its independence in 1930, Mexico holds election after every 6 years to elect its president. But until 2000, every election was won by a party called PRI, that is Institutional Revolutionary Party. Should we consider the elections described above as examples of people electing their rulers? No. Reading these examples, we get a sense that uh, we cannot. Democracy must be based on free and fair election where those currently in power and have fair chance of losing. Yes, of course. Here I can guide you, I can tell you, I can explain you that the democracy that we all are interested is actually it is not correct. So democracy must be there for means uh, for the welfarement of the people, and in the democracy the representative must be chosen by the people of that particular nation. So here in case of Mexico and China, we cannot say it's a complete democracy, because in case of China and Mexico, people are not electing their representatives, and not truly people elect that leaders. One person, one vote, one value means a single individual like me, my value is same to the vote of the Prime Minister of India, correct? So this is the equality we have given while voting also. Democracy is based on fundamental principle of political equality. However, there are many instances of denial of the equal right to vote. Until 2015 in Saudi Arabia, women did not have the right to vote. Estonia has made its citizenship rules in such a way that people belonging to Russian minority found it difficult to get the right to vote. So, Estonia, the Saudi Arabia, you cannot say them they are perfectly democratic nations. Have you seen that democracy based fundamental principles of political equality, justice, like they are far away, because women, like the women empowerment, equality, here you can't found, because Saudi Arabia women do not have right to vote in the election. Even in case of Estonia, it made difficult for Russian minority, and to difficult in Fiji, the electoral system in such a that the vote of indigenous Fiji has more value than that of Indian Fijian. Means I want to tell you, I will tell you right now, there are 35% people from Fiji nation are Indians, okay, and they don't have equal voting right in India, in Fiji. The value of indigenous means local Fiji persons vote is very high as compared to Indian, okay, so they have more values as compared to it. The feature of democracy this highlights is that in a democracy, each adult citizen must have one vote, and in turn, each one vote must have one value. Yes, of course, each adult. In case of India, it is 18 years, correct? Above the 18 year, we can cast our votes. Before it was 21, but after the amendment 68, 61. 61th amendment of India's constitution done in the year 1989 and operated in the year 1990. And from that we have started that this principle means the persons having age above 18 can cast their votes. So equality in voting rights also in the democracy. Rule of law and respect of rights. Yes, of course, there is rule of law in India. If you look that no one can blame or no one can distrust with Supreme Court of India. Whatever the decision is given by Supreme Court of India is bound to each and everybody in this country. Even the government decisions you can challenge it in the Supreme Court of India. So this is the rule of law we have, and rights are there. Even my fundamental rights are abolished by any other, so I can raise my voice directly to the Supreme Court or to the High Court by demanding that the individual one or the government is threatening my fundamental rights. So this is how we have a great tradition of rule of law and respect for the rights. Robert Mugabe ruled the country since Zimbabwe attained independence from white minority rule in 1980, and from then the country has been ruled by a party that led the freedom struggle, JDNU PF. Its leader is Robert Mugabe. Okay, and he ruled the country since independence. Even if elections were held regularly, it was always on by JDNU PF President Mugabe, and he was popular but also used unfair practices in the elections. So that thing is very worst that Mugabe was using. One of the greatest character played by in his name Mugabe Kushwa, I think Amrish Puri did that work. In election, there was a law that limited the right to criticize the president. Yes, television and radio were controlled by the government and gave only ruling party's version. There were independent newspaper, but the government harassed those journalists who went against it, and so on. Not a democratic government. Democratic government rules within limits set by constitutional law and citizens' right. So in this case of Zimbabwe, we found that it is not a good example of democracy, because inside democracy, whatever is done, it is in the light of constitution. Okay, constitutional law are binding for each and everybody in that city, in that nation. Hence, we cannot deduce that democracy is a form of government in which rulers elected by the people take all the major decisions. So this is how we know about it, that inside the democracy, the rulers that are elected by the adult citizens of the country, they took the decisions, major decisions. Elections offer a choice and fair opportunity to the people to change the current rulers. Means if something is done wrong by a particular leader or their party, that party can be removed in the upcoming elections. Okay, so this is the punishment for them that not doing proper and good work. This choice and opportunity is available to all the people of India on equal basis. It is not meant like that 1 crore person's vote value is great, and as look at me, and I'm having less money with me, but both of us have a same and equal vote casting right in India. This choice is very good. Now we'll see about why democracy. Cons of democracy. We'll see. Leaders keep changing in democracy, leading to instability. Yes, it means this is a good argument actually. If all the politicians are same, after 5 years we change them, again the other came in the power. So this is how this system, this democracy can be threatened by instability. Democracy is all about political competition and power play, leaving no scope for morality. It is the prime objective of any political party in democracy, that to get the power. Okay, so that's really bad thing, that there is always political competition and power play, and there is no scope for any kind of morality. Many people have to be consulted in democracy, that leads to delays. So the decision making process is too hectic and unhealthy, which leads that decisions can be delayed. Elected leaders do not know the best interest of people, resulting in bad decisions. As I already explained that elected leaders do not know the best interest of the people. That's why they took some bad decision. Democracy leads to corruption since it is based on electoral competitions. Yes, definitely. Corrupt politicians is the saddest part of the democracy. Ordinary people don't know what is good for them. They should not decide anything. Yes, means whatever the politicians are doing, it is hidden completely. That's why ordinary people are not knowing actually what is happening. From these arguments, we can see that democracy of the kind we see may not be the ideal form of government. However, we will see if democracy is better than other forms of government that are that are there for us to choose from. Now, the arguments I'll see in favor of democracy. Here, I would explain why democracy is the good. Or better form than any other forms. Hmm? A democratic government is better government because it is more accountable form of government. Taken the example of India and China famines in 1958-61. While China was hit badly, India did not fare as badly despite its economic condition. A reason for could be that India responded to food scarcity in a way that Chinese government didn't. Here we see that democracy is better than any form of government is responding to the needs of the people. But China didn't responded. In which way the Indian government under the leadership, I hope, Jawaharlal Nehru responded to the people of India. Democracy improves the quality of decision making. Yes, of course. As decisions are delayed because the decision making process is not in a single hand. That's why democracy is based on constitution and discussion. Okay, sorry, consultation and discussion. A democratic decision always involves many people discussions and meetings, and they are able to point out possible mistakes in any decision. This may take time. However, the advantage of taking time over important decisions is that it reduces the chances of rash or irresponsible decisions. Correct. Rash or irresponsible decisions. Democracy provides a method to deal with differences and conflicts in any society. So it is providing a good environment. People are bound to have differences of opinion and interests. Yes, of course. Maybe I don't like Narendra Modi. Maybe I like Modi ji. Correct. So these two opinions, any of it may I belong. Okay. So there is always difference in opinion. These differences are particularly more in a country like ours with amazing social diversity. People belong to different regions, speak different languages, practice different religions, and have different castes. The preferences of one group can clash with those of the other groups. How do we resolve such conflict? Democracy provides the only peaceful solution to this problem. In a democracy, no one is a permanent winner or loser. Different groups can live with one another peacefully. Yes. So democracy didn't allow that you are supremely powerful and you can do anything. So this is how different groups can live with peacefully. But here I would suggest one more important thing is that who is powerful in case of democracy? Then the people of India are powerful. The constitution is the supreme law, and it must be binding to all the different institutes and the governments working in our country. So this is how we have seen about the democracy's good point. Democracy enhances the dignity of citizen. Democracy is based on the principle of political equality. It recognizes that the poorest and least educated have the same status as the rich and educated. So equality principle. Democracy is better than other forms of government because it allows us to correct our own mistake. Whatever we have done, and some if it was a wrong, so we can correct it. So there is chance to correct the mistake. Even if no government can guarantee that no mistake will be made in a democracy, one can be sure that it will not be hidden for too long. It makes space for public discussion on these mistakes. There is also room for correction. Rulers have to change their decision, or they could themselves be changed. If they don't change the decision, which is cruel for the people of India, so they should be removed from the power by the people of India. Broader meanings of democracy. In this chapter, the meaning of democracy is discussed in a descriptive sense. Students get to learn about democracy as a form of government, thus helping them to identify the clear set of minimal features that democracy requires. The common form adopted by democracy is a representative democracy. In democratic countries, all people do not rule. A majority is allowed to take decisions on behalf of all people through their elected representatives. This has become necessary for the reasons given below. Modern democracies involve such a large number of people that it is physically impossible for them to sit together and take a collective decision. So that's great that modern democracies are having such kind of cases with them. Even if the citizen does not have the time to desire or the skills to take part in all the decisions. Democracy as a principle can go beyond the government and can be applied to any sphere of life. People use the word democracy not to describe any existing government but to set up an ideal standard that all democracies must aim to become. So, democracy is the great principle that dreams of democracy are really great, and we should have to dream for it, and we should have to follow the democratic ways and path in our country. Ideals are great. Still, having an understanding of a democracy as an ideal will explain why to value democracy, because it enables people to judge an existing democracy and identify their weaknesses. It also helps to distinguish between the minimal democracy and a good democracy. The most common form of democracy in today's world is being ruled through people's elected representatives. However, for a small community, there can be other ways of making democratic decisions. All people can sit together and make decision directly. This is how Gram Sabha should work in village. And here I am ending this chapter, not the lecture. We have done with the first chapter of polity. It is the important one, and here we understood what exactly means democracy and what are the good point, what are the merits, what are the demerits, what are the possible requirements of the democracy, and how we should go with the democracy, and what is the requirement of democracy in our country. The country like India should be ruled by democracy only. We have seen in detail in this chapter once again. Okay, now I'll shift myself to chapter number 3, that is constitutional design. Here again the same story happened. The story is chapter number 6, but it is chapter number 3. It is constitutional design. Democratic constitution in South Africa. Example: apartheid will look is a system of racial discrimination unique to South Africa imposed by white Europeans. That's truly bad and sad thing for us that there was racial discrimination in the South Africa. Nelson Mandela fought that actually. He was a great person. He took inspiration from Gandhiji, because Gandhiji was the one who started movement against the discrimination in South Africa. When he went to South Africa, he came back in India on 9 January 1915. Before that, he was working in the South Africa, because he went to the South Africa in a matter of something, because he was a barrister, he was a advocate or lawyer, so he went there. The system of apartheid divided the people and labeled them. During the 17th and 18th centuries, the trading companies from Europe occupied with its arms and force and became the local rulers. The system of apartheid divided the people and labeled them on the basis of their skin color, black one, white one. and that's completely sad. The white rulers treated all non-whites as inferiors. Oh, the non-whites did not have voting rights and were forbidden from living in white areas. The black, colored, and Indian fought against the apartheid system from 1950. The African National Congress ANC was the umbrella organization that led the struggle against the policies of segregation. Nelson Mandela was one of the leaders amongst the eight who were tried for treason, means Deshdroha, by the white South African government. They were sentenced to life imprisonment in 1964 for daring to oppose the apartheid regime in the country. Now, giving rise to new constitution. It's the next point. As the protest and struggle against the apartheid increased, the blacks could not longer be kept under the rule of government through repression. The white regime changed its politics. Discriminatory laws were repealed, ban on political parties and restrictions on the media were lifted. Nelson Mandela was released after 28 years in the Robben Island prison. The apartheid government came to be and in the midnight of 26 April 1994, paving way for the formation of multiracial government. So that was a remarkable decision taken on the day of 26 April 1994 in the South Africa, because from the Robben Island he was in prison for 28 years. People call him Madiba in the South Africa, and Nelson Mandela was the great and the great one only among the few modern politicians, the global politicians. His date of birth may be 6th December, like the Dr. Baba Saheb Ambedkar. And I will share one thing of him with you, that he was the first black president of South Africa also. So after that he was chosen as president of South Africa. Following the emergence of new democratic South Africa, the party that ruled through oppression and brutal killings and the party that led the freedom struggle sat together to draw up a common constitution. So the opposite parties sat together and they were deciding that how a future constitution should be. This constitution gave to its citizens the most extensive rights available in any country. Together they decide that in the search of solution to the problems, nobody should be excluded. Why need of constitution? We'll see the next point of us. Why there is need of constitution. Take an example of South Africa to see why need of the constitution and what constitutions do. The oppressor and oppressed were planning to live together as equals in new democracy. Each section wanted to safeguard their interest and wanted substantial social and economic rights through negotiations. So this is why democracy and the constitution is required. And these kind of negotiations and a set of rule that guarantees equality to both the parties is constitution. Both the parties came to a compromise. The whites agreed to the principle of majority rule and that of one person, one vote. They also agreed to accept some basic rights for the poor and the workers. The blacks agreed that majority rule would not be absolute and that the majority would not take away the property of white minority. How was this compromise to be implemented? The only way to build and maintain trust in such a situation was to write down some rulers of the game that everyone would abide by. These supreme rulers that no government would be able to ignore are called a constitution. So these are the rules were framed in the new constitution of South Africa, because there was compromise between the white minority and the high populated community in high populated black community in Russia. Every country has diverse groups of people. All over the world people have difference of opinion and interest. The constitution is the supreme law. You please underline this because it is the definition of constitution. The constitution is the supreme law that determines the relationship among people living in territory called citizen and also relationship between the people and the government who is ruling them. Okay, now find what constitution do below. First, it generates a degree of trust and coordination that is necessary for different kinds of people to live together. It's a paper of trust, actually a book of trust. Second, it specifies how the government will be constituted, who will have the power to take which decisions, means which decisions will be taken and how it will be taken. So it was like that. Third, it lays down limits on the powers of government and tells us what the rights of citizens are. Fourth, it expresses the aspirations of the people about creating a good society. Okay, about creating a good society. All countries that have constitutions are not necessarily democratic, but all countries that are democratic will have constitutions. Yes, of course, it's the ultimate statement here. We have to see all countries that have constitution are not necessarily democratic, but all countries that are democratic will have constitutions. Making of Indian constitution, how the constitution of India was framed, as I explained, by the a recommendation of the British Parliament in the 1946 cabinet mission came in India, and that decided how the constitution of India frame. India's constitution was drawn up under very difficult circumstances. The country was born through a partition on the basis of religious differences and was traumatic experiences for the people of India and Pakistan. The British had left it to the rulers of the princely states to decide whether they wanted to merge with India or Pakistan or remain independent. The merger of these princely states was a difficult and uncertain task. When the constitution was being written, the future of country did not look as secure as it does today. When the people at that time were drafting the constitution, absolutely, and they were having some doubts that is it work or is it will be successful or not. But still, if you are looking, India is a successful democratic nation. I hope that it's the world's biggest democracy. Part to the constitution, one of the major advantages for the makers of India's constitution was that consensus about what a democratic India should look like had already evolved during the freedom struggle. In 1928, Motilal Nehru and 8 other Congress leaders drafted a constitution for India, and in 1931, a resolution at the Karachi session of Indian National Congress dwelt on how independent India's constitution should look like. So it was in the year 1928, the work by Motilal Nehru, and 1931, the Congress session, especially I hope it was Karachi session. Okay. Both these documents include features such as universal adult franchise, like voting right, right to freedom, I can speak, dwell, go everywhere, and equality to the protecting rights of minorities, even Muslims, Sikhs, and the other communities, those who are in minority, Jain, should have been granted with some specific rights. These basic values were accepted by all leaders much before the Constituent Assembly met to deliberate on the Constitution. That is why the Indian Constitution adopted many institutional details and procedures from colonial laws like the Government of India Act 1935. So, colonial laws. Hmm? Major colonial law called the Government of India Act 1935 was the Great Act, and I hope almost 250 articles or the things are borrowed from that part. Many of our leaders were inspired by the ideals of French Revolution, as I already took: liberty, fraternity, equality, the practice of parliamentary democracy in Britain, and the Bill of Rights in US. So Bill of Rights means the guaranteeing fundamental rights to the citizens, and the practice of parliamentary democracy, how it is working in the Britain. So they got inspiration from these points. Constituent Assembly. The drafting of a constitution was done by an assembly of elected representatives called a Constituent Assembly. Elections to the Constituent Assembly were held in July 1946 and its first meeting was held in December 1946. Soon after, the country was divided into India and Pakistan, and the Constituent Assembly was also divided into the Constituent Assembly of India and that of Pakistan. The Constituent Assembly that wrote the Indian Constitution had 299 members, but previously they were 389 members. But after the partition, the number was reduced to 299. The assembly adopted the constitution on 26th of 1949, but it came into effect on 26th of January 1950. To mark this day, we celebrate January 26 as Republic Day every year. Correct? Why should we accept constitution made by assembly more than 6 decades ago? So why we did this, we'll see. The constitution does not reflect the view of its member done alone. It expresses a broad consensus of that time. The second reason for accepting the constitution is that the constitution assembly represented the people of India, because it was accepted by the people of India. Even in the preamble you can see hereby enact, like that statement you may see. First, some basic principles were decided and agreed upon. Then, a drafting committee chaired by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar prepared a draft constitution for discussion. Several rounds of thorough discussion took place on the draft constitution, a detailed discussion. Clause by clause, more than 2000 amendments were considered. Every document was presented and every word spoken in the constitution assembly has been recorded and preserved. These are called Constituent Assembly debates. Guiding values of Indian Constitution. First, understand the overall philosophy of what our Constitution is about. Okay, and then you should go for it. The dream and the promise philosophy of Constitution is very important, that it is socialist nature, secular nature, sovereign nature. Sovereign is what people have the supreme right to make decision on internal as well as external matters. No external power can dictate the government of India. That's what we are, sovereign country. Socialist means social equality should be given and no political, social and economic discrimination would happen in our country. Secular, every religion of India and every individual one have freedom of practicing their own religion. Democratic, yes, of course we have seen that rulers must be accountable for the government, and government is accountable to the people of India. A republic, yes, of course the head of state is elected by election, not by hereditary position. Justice, yes, social inequalities should be reduced and each and everybody should get justice. Liberty, great. Unreasonable restrictions नहीं होंगी, no unreasonable restrictions, that's the liberty. Equality, all are equal before law. This is how the traditional social inequalities to be ended. Fraternity, bandhuta, all of us should behave as we are members of same family. One should not treat fellow citizen as inferior. And institutional design, yes, of course there are many institutes created by India's constitution. So institutional arrangement in India's constitution laid a good foundation, a solid bedrock in India's constitution. That's really great thing for us also. So thank you so much for being with me, and here I am ending the session with telling a homework to you, and the homework is find out principles or the novel characters of India's constitution. Okay, find out the novel characters or the important characters of India's constitution. Okay, thank you so much.